Hi everyone, this is Abel. Welcome back to my channel. This is Pens and Portals, which is a show that I use to force people to join me and to talk about books. And today I'm really happy and really proud to have a special guest, which is author Bryan Wilson, the author of the Power of the Stars series. The first book is The Forsaken Planet. I have the chunky first edition of this book that doesn't exist anymore. I'm really proud because this is pretty rare by now. Okay, it almost looks almost identical to the one that you have by now. But if one day I need money, I can try to sell this one because it's special. Welcome, Bryan, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And how it is going? Because you're going on a lot of interviews to do sacred promotions for your upcoming release. How is it going?
Trying to, yeah. It's been going good. This is, I want to say, the fifth one.
Yeah.
I got two other ones this week, and then that's it for the live. Well, that's it for the interviews, and then next week
Mhm.
during the actual day of the book launch, I'm gonna have a little fun launch party with some author friends, some bookstagrammers, booktubers, that whole thing. So I'm looking forward to that one.
That's really interesting. It almost feels like being in the junkets when we interview authors and actors for our upcoming movies. Yeah, this show is an excuse basically to have a chance to do something like that, but because of books.
Yeah.
So you may know if you have been following my channel from the beginning. It's not that old of a channel. I've been around for almost 2 years, I think. I
Hmm.
started in September of 2023, actually, because there was a readathon, I think, which was Space Opera September. And I was scouring the internet, searching for space opera. And when I started the channel, I had much, much more science fiction in this channel. So that was my main focus, especially space opera, because science fiction is that huge of a macro genre that you can have basically anything, right?
Yeah.
Oh, we have our friends, John,
Hey, John.
Mr. Douglas. Welcome. Welcome.
Thanks for stopping by.
So, and I think I found your book because of was it enlisted in the science fiction competition, or am I wrong? Or did I
Uh,
find
I was
it?
in SBSFC.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was then. It might have been then. That might be where you saw
Yeah.
it.
I think I saw an Amazon wish list with all the books that were in that first bunch. They have different kind. They have an initial bunch of books, and then and as the competition goes along, it reduces the number of books because they get selected or not. And I think I
Hmm.
found the book there, and it was actually one of the first book that I reviewed for this competition.
I guess my cover
And
blurb did its job, huh?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the cover is pretty nice. It works absolutely. And then I think I read it. I read it, and I also it was when I discovered that Alexa can actually read aloud your book while you're driving. You
Hmm.
still didn't have an audiobook for that book, so I listened to most of the books, and it was uncanny because Alexa is that good at reading books. Maybe a few pronunciation and a few tones, she misses the tone
Okay,
of the one, but it
that's
worked. And it
interesting.
was a nice experience.
This is the
It
first
worked.
I'm hearing this. I didn't know that was how you read it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think around 70% of the book I listened while driving and working, and the rest I read in
Gotcha.
the old way. So,
Well, I'm sure you
John,
start
have we all
complaining here.
managed to take it through the weekend without complaining about the star reviews? Do we have to talk about that? I don't know if we
We
have
were
to
kind of
use
talking
this.
about it before we came on. How it's just like you just think people
Yeah,
just do things to try and go viral, and it
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah, yeah,
backfires on them
yeah.
sometimes.
I think that if it works for them on a promotional way, good for them. I don't think it makes the community a better place
No,
That's
not at all.
that's
It's
that's
shown the
my
ugly side of both sides for me,
yeah,
authors,
yeah,
reviewers. It's like,
yeah.
you know, we as authors, I made a post on it myself. We should not be
Hmm.
expecting reviewers. They don't owe us anything. So if we're gonna
Exactly.
ask for a review, you gotta be okay with an honest review. I mean, that's just the name of the
Hmm.
game. And in terms of reviewers, come on, let's not be applauding review bombing a person's. These books take us
Yeah,
years
that
and
doesn't
years
work.
and
So
years
absolutely.
to make, and you're just shattering any chance that person now has at having any sort of success because of a few people's opinions. It's just, I don't like any of it.
I think that it depends on the stage that you where you are at in your career as a writer. As
Hmm.
an adult, as adults, we should all be able to deal with others' opinions without going down on a
Tearing them
shouting
down.
match.
Yeah.
Usually should work that way. But I also understand that a book is such a personal and intimate expression of yourself. It's a really intimate expression, artistic expression that all authors we are specifically really really sensitive to criticism, but the
Hmm.
way you manifest that, yeah, I mean, you can get hurt, you can feel hurt because of a
Oh yeah.
really bad, a scorching review, or even when you read a 3-star review that it is also really really critical, but somehow it also is a 3-star, so you can feel hurt
Oh, for sure. Listen,
anyway.
and especially when you first publish. When my first
Yeah,
three
yeah,
stars that came in, to me, a 3 star is not that good of a book. It's
yeah,
average at
exactly.
best. So when I got my first 3 stars, granted, I didn't go
Mhm.
on some rant or complain about it,
Exactly,
but
exactly.
it hurt a little bit. I was like, that
Yeah,
means they thought the book was just okay, which isn't necessarily the case. I've come to learn now.
yeah.
And I've also come to learn if they did think it's just okay, who cares? It's so subjective. We all have such different tastes.
There is a
It's
discussion to be had about the way stores interpret that 3 stars. I mean, you can rationalize and see, "Oh, it's an honest review, and 3 stars is a 6 on a 10, so it's
yeah,
not that tragic." But there is a discussion to be had about the way the store will show or not show the book because of the
for
amount
sure.
of 3 star that you had. So I understand the place, and believe me, I published 9 books in Italy, so I had 1 stars and 2 stars,
Mhm.
and I had actually a 2 star for my actual book on the Crimson Fire right here, and I read that review, and completely not okay with what is written, but I'm not going to pursue the writer, the reader, because of what he said in the review.
Oh, yeah,
I don't
for sure.
think he's right,
Yeah,
but nobody's going to die because of that. So I think
and
the
that's gonna
more,
happen to anyone who's published long enough. I mean, the same with me. All my
yeah,
books have 2 or 1 stars. I have some people absolutely bashing it. I mean, just bashing my books like I
uh-huh,
did something personally wrong to them. And like
exactly.
you said, I don't agree with them, but I'm not, it is
Even
what it
the
is.
hobby has around the 10,000 1-star reviews. So,
Yeah.
no one is going to die for that. There is another discussion to be had about the way, as I told you, about that kind of behavior from authors and reviewers influences the community. We are lucky because the SFF community, especially on the indie published side of thing,
Mhm.
is really cohesive. There's a lot of collaboration, there is a lot of talking, there is a lot of help to that we can give it, that we can have. So it sounds strange when something like that happens,
Yeah.
and I'm happy to say that it is weird. It doesn't happen that often. So
Yeah, no,
when it does happen, it sounds like a catastrophic,
yeah, yeah. And it's
really
and it's
strange
tough
thing.
because, like, the one that recently happened,
Mhm,
the first thing I saw was the reviewer bashing the person, and what I didn't
mhm,
like about I don't agree with what the author did, but what I didn't like is then the reviewers talking about it like this is like a vast majority of us authors
mhm,
attack the reviewing community and stuff like that, and that was
mhm,
just the vibe.
yeah,
Maybe it's not what they meant to say, but that was the vibe I got from their post, and so it makes me immediately want to defend the author, even though I don't agree with what the author did, because it's like
uh-huh, mhm,
the most authors I know, we're not complaining about our 3 stars. We're not complaining about our 1 stars. We may not
absolutely.
like them, but we're adults and we're rational and we're
Especially not on
mature.
social media. I mean,
Exactly.
I can go and pester my family because if I feel hurt
Yeah.
in my pride, but not
Yep.
on social media. Let's say let's read John's comment. If I may play devil's advocate, I do think a review bombing because you stepped over an imaginary line breaking arbitrary unwritten rules you may not know, but it's a bit fair.
It,
Yeah, yeah.
listen, I said in my post the
Mm,
review bombing and the applauding of it,
mhm.
that's 10 times worse than what the author did.
Yeah,
What the author did isn't good either, but that
yeah,
is
yeah.
that is much worse. It's not even close.
We all struggle to. I think there is always a moment for all of us when we struggle to be properly adult and to be
Yeah.
completely objectives. It is difficult, but I can tell you, the more you stay in the market and the more you deal with a vast amount of people on social media, the easier it is to deal
Yeah.
and to try and understand if even if in the more scorching reviews there is something useful. It's not reviewer job to give you actual feedback on your craftsmanship, but it can give you a good amount of reviews can give you a feedback about
Oh, yeah. You'll learn from
on
it.
a broad scope of things working and not working in a novel.
Oh yeah. My
So
writing
you can
definitely got
cherry
better.
pick good things on. Oh, there's Tori that has
Story.
another book coming close, a
Fantastic
sci-fi
cover.
western. I don't remember the title. I'm sorry. I will search for it and I will share it.
I've
That
seen the
has
cover.
this
It's
bombastic cover that is really really nice.
beautiful.
And then there's now another comment here from John that says, "I know them well. None of us here review bomb, but we, I don't know how to do it. I have my account. I don't want to be blocked on Goodreads because I bombed someone that I
No,
don't
no.
know."
Well, I would never review, even if it was a person I just could not stand, could not be any more against what they say. I'm not going to go and
Mhm.
review bomb their work.
And I'm going to be honest. I have written a couple of years ago. So my policy is that I don't review a book that I haven't finished. Okay, and I don't give a score to a book that I haven't finished. If I have finished it, it is most of the time basically a warranted 4 stars, because
Mhm.
if I don't finish it and I abandon it, but I don't feel entitled to give a score if I don't finish it. I know that other people do, and that 2 stars that I have on my book is from someone that didn't finish the book. I don't think it's fair, but I'm not going to
I,
pursue
I,
that
I
person
agree
for
100%. I
that.
don't like people who
So
do that.
but when I actually published on the international market, I told myself I had negative reviews for books that I didn't finish. Even if I didn't give a score, I explained why I decided to DNF. And I could have left that kind of feedback on Goodreads. But at a certain point, I told myself there's a vast amount of opinions about this that are kind of concurring, and other people are saying mostly the same things, the same criticism that I am that I did,
Mhm.
and a few of them are doing it better
Mhm.
than I did. And I don't think that my own take on that is going to help anybody having a better understanding of the book. And I
Yeah.
don't want to contribute in a negative way to the discourse. So I went back and I erased those reviews, even if I wasn't contributing in the score because there was no score. But I still thought that in some way, in hindsight, I wasn't helping anybody with that take. So I
Yeah, and
did that.
I think that's good reflection. I mean, I think any of us, it's okay to not like a book. That's perfectly acceptable. And
Absolutely.
I've had
Mhm.
negative reviews that, taking it all into account, a collective whole, and analyzing it all, I think it has bettered my work to take some of
Exactly.
this, information in. So I think it's fine to leave a review criticizing things, but we should all be respectful about
Yeah.
it. And I've had bad reviews that are just like, I really wanted to like this book, but it sucks. Like, oh, thanks. Like, I can really take stuff from that. It's
I also think that if you get really, really offended and really, really hurt, it's a you're showing something different. So you have some kind of a problem. So
Yeah,
you're
it's
probably a
personal.
bit of insecure about your writing and about your book, which
Yeah, I
can be
agree.
understandable, especially if you have recently published something. If you're really fresh on the market, it
Hmm.
can be understandable to be dubious about everything that you have published. But the more you say and the more you share your work, the more confident you become, and you can actually read a really bad review, a really scorching review, and say, "This is bullshit. Come on, my book is better than that.
Yeah,
I don't believe you. I don't believe." Okay.
no, that's what
So
it
it's
is. It's all about confidence.
yeah,
It's,
yeah, yeah.
I'm definitely a much more confident author I am now than when I first
Hmm.
published The Forsaken Planet. And
Yeah,
back then I barely talked on socials. It's probably why it took me so long to build socials, just because I saw so many arguments and lines being crossed, and I was like, I didn't know it was the right thing to say, not the right thing to say. And I'd almost say that's like my advice to anyone that's going to be publishing new soon.
hmm,
But at the same time, it doesn't really grow your account that way either. So I don't know if I'm the best
yeah.
person.
You have to allow yourself time to grow as a
Mm-hmm.
it. In a sense, it's kind of becoming a new person that has to face things that you have never faced, and you have to grow a little bit of a thicker skin to stay on the market and to play the
For sure.
game that it is publishing. But it takes time, and I understand. But it doesn't also justify having a vitriolic take as a reader and as a reviewer. I don't think it's a good thing. But I don't want to cut too much time to your interview because we only want to talk about your books.
Nah, it's fine. It's fun
Tori
talk.
says, I can even say that review bombing is childish because my children know better than that. Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Tori, absolutely right. She's the perfect ideal of the reader mom that has a perfect take on that. Except Quicksilver. Vanessa knows that I have read Quicksilver, that I didn't left. It's a romantasy book. And
Okay.
I know very little about that genre. I'm trying to read something. And I DNF'd the book and I just said, life is too short. I'm going on. And I can understand why that book was so successful. And I will probably watch the movie. It will come on Netflix, I think. But reading the book, I have too many books waiting for me on the TBR pile.
It's
Honest
perfectly
and
fine
transparent.
DNF in a book. I mean, there's nothing wrong with
Exactly.
that whatsoever.
Honest and transparent reviews are important, but that's different. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Vanessa says that that's a great take. Thank you. Thank you, Vanessa. And she's also as interesting takes. Another note here from Tori. I have purchased books because of negative reviews before. Something that you didn't like might be exactly what another reader is looking for. And I have to say that that's exactly my experience with the first binding by R. Verdi,
Okay.
which had a lot of buzz around this book because many people thought it was so similar to The Name of the Wind that I haven't read, honestly. But I saw specifically one review from a very, very famous and really influential booktuber that was shouting and screaming because he felt personally offended because that book was so similar to The Name of the Wind. This was unacceptable. And this is incredible. This is a high crime. And I went and purchased the book exactly because of that. Yeah, right. I'm excited
Thank you.
to read both of your work. And
Likewise.
you're right, total support. Do it at your leisure whenever you want. So let's talk about your books, right? So as I said, your book was one of the first that I've read during the inception of my channel. And you're one of the first authors that I connected with, patient enough to listen to my vocals on Instagram. A ton of vocals about the things that I liked
It was a
and the
lot.
things that I didn't like, because I felt that you were receptive enough to that kind of feedback. If I
Thank
have
goodness.
the
A
feeling
few
that
months
an
earlier,
author,
it might have went very differently.
yeah,
I'd had the experience a little bit by then, so
we're still friends now, so
of
it
course,
means that you
of course.
survived that feedback. So what were your experience as a reader and the kind of media that you consumed that in a way shaped your lore as a reader and then as a writer? So tell us about something about your experience.
Yeah, so my reading experience, it started when I was 12 years old. We were assigned The Hobbit. I remember it was seventh grade, and we were supposed to read like the first whatever chapters. And then the first weekend, I read the entire book. I was so hooked by it. I loved it. I remember I went next Monday. I went into my teacher and I said, "What are more books like this? I want something else like this." It was my first experience of just not being able to put it down, and she just started laughing and she's like, "Well, I got the perfect thing for you." And she told me about the Lord of the Rings. And yeah, I mean, I wrote a sci-fi book, but I've been more predominantly an epic fantasy reader. My favorite series is Wheel of Time. But I eventually got into sci-fi. I read Ender's Game. Loved that absolutely. As I got older, started playing things like Halo, the Independence Day movie. Me and my buddies still talk about that. It was just like the perfect. It came out right at that perfect time for us elder
Exactly.
millennials.
Hmm.
And so I just got really into sci-fi. I was really interested in things like space and kind of the mysteries of space and stuff like that. And I always just wanted an epic fantasy book that was set in space. And so when I got into my older teens, I said I'm going to try and write one. I remember like in Aragon when I was in my teens, and at that time, Christopher Paolini was, I think he was only a couple of years older than I was. Like he wrote that, I think, when he was
Yeah,
in his
yeah.
in his
Hmm.
teens. And so I was like, well, if this guy can do it, why can't I do it? And didn't quite work out that way, but yeah, no, I started writing it then. I didn't get it out in my teens. It took me 20 years to write this series,
Yeah, it's
or
quite
at
a
least
slow
get the first
process.
book out there. But yeah, that's kind of how my journey began, and through all of that, I've been reading a ton of all the favorites in the fantasy and sci-fi genres.
Okay. And I think that that was one of the first thing that really spoke to me when I read your book was URF.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
What am I missing? John, explain that, please. So I think, and is that especially the Forsaken Planet? I think that the second book and probably the third they shift a little bit, but especially the first book, it felt like fantasy in space. It felt
Hmm.
very much like fantasy in space, and that spoke to me on a deeper level because I like science fiction, but I don't exactly love hard sci-fi concept. When a huge chunk of the book is assigned to that, to the techno bubbling, I think
Hmm.
that very few authors manage to do that and still keep the novel engaging on an emotional level. Okay,
Yeah.
and that's why I felt so connected to your novel because of the character. And there's another level there, not only because there was so much time for the character development, and but also because of the kind of people that they were. So
Hmm.
I have always in conversation with the actual state of SFF when it looked like that all the characters they must to be gray, they must have a troubled past, they must be
Yeah, that's
hateful, incredibly, and I understand that because a rich background makes for interesting character development, but sometimes I think we are reaching a no return point when it's a little too much. So to have a bunch of characters, especially the group of characters that we have in the book at the beginning of the story, most of them, all of them being good people in an
mhm.
impossible situation and growing with them, you actually made me enjoy school settings that I usually hate. So it was
Yeah.
kind of a miracle. And I think that spoke to the very strong emotional core of the novel that made it so enjoyable. Yeah,
Yeah.
kudos to you.
Thank you. No, that was definitely my intent. Just I do get it now. Welcome to Earth. When he knocks
Okay, 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 okay.
when he knocks out the alien in the ship, I should have picked up on that. I'm actually upset with myself that I didn't. But
You should have. I don't because I'm Italian and it sounded different here. Okay, so
um, but yeah, no, that was definitely an intent of mine. I'm not a big, I guess you call it grimdark. I'm not a big the gray
Mhm.
character. I understand. I think that blew up so much because it is kind of how more human, and it is more how people aren't necessarily straight good, straight evil in our world. So it was
Yeah,
a
yeah,
a
yeah.
different side of things. But for me, I've always enjoyed kind of that straight good versus evil story. I want and my series does get a little more gray as it goes on,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
but because I think we all kind of start as good people. We all want to be good peoples, and things that happen to certain people that change who they are. And so that's
Mhm.
what my story is, especially as the series progresses. You got this young guy or this group of young guys that are just thrown into this interstellar conflict, and you see how it changes some of them. You see
Mhm.
how they learn this amazing power, and some of them are granted these extraordinary capabilities. And how would a normal 20 something year old act with that, and with the responsibility of planets on their shoulders? And I enjoy the aspect of seeing someone struggle with the weight of all that on them,
Yeah.
but I like it coming from the place of, this was a good person at least at one point, and
Mhm.
they can get back to being there. Not saying that's like exactly what the arc takes in mind, because it's not, but that's just the kind of theme I like in stories personally, is I want to know
Yeah.
I'm rooting for a good
Mhm.
person. Like, you know, I always hated in Game of Thrones, they tried to make you love Jamie, and I hated Jamie. I was like, I don't like this guy. The things he did earlier, why am I going to like him? I don't care if he's trying to be a good person now. I don't care what
Exactly.
led to that. He still did terrible things. You do terrible things,
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah, yeah, I
not okay.
understand.
No matter what led to you doing that, it's not okay.
I
So,
think there was a place historically, because the genres, they shift, they change. There are vogues, there are waves, and on the market you have trains of. But I think that there was a specific moment where Grimdark had more of a reason to exist, because it
mhm,
was in a conversation with all that came before. So
mhm,
it was kind of reactionary to the epic fantasy that we have and to the worldview that we had. Most of what we have now, I think it's a little bit performative. It's a little bit for shock value. That's why I think it's so difficult to pull it off. And
yeah,
when they pull it off, it is amazing. I have read very little of that. I have read incredibly good green dark stories, but I think that that's why it's so difficult to make it relevant today, because it becomes a little bit overblown, a little bit too much. There's an
yes.
interesting question here for you. You're answering this. You would say the defining difference between fantasy and straight sci-fi. What do you think?
I mean, I think the major difference is straight sci-fi. You're more so based in a reality of our sciences and
Mhm.
our technology, things like that. Whereas sci fantasy, the story may be centered around technology, or maybe centered around space, like mine is space opera, but it has
Mhm.
those heavy fantasy, which many times is a magic system,
Mhm.
influences. I mean, that's why I call mine science fantasy, because yes, it's a space opera. Yes, you're traveling across on starships across the universe, stuff like that. But with mine, it's a little bit of a spoiler alert, but everyone outside of Earth can use the magic system, which is called Solera in my books.
Mhm.
And because of that, and it's kind of like the Force, except everyone has it. And
Mhm.
because of that, if you really think, I tried to make this, obviously a lot of my story, that it's hard to base it in some sort of reality
Yeah.
to our real world, but I tried to make
Mhm.
it if this happened, it's an actual realistic thing. And to me, if we all had the powers of a Jedi, our
Mhm.
world would be very different. We would run things very differently. Our technology would be very different. And
Absolutely.
so I tried to
Mhm.
implement that into my story, of really most of the tech is run by this Solera, this what I call the power of the stars. And then
Mhm.
there's obviously, I rooted my magic system into it's kind of energy, star magic, and I kind of connected that with human beings, with our souls, where kind
Mhm.
of what our place is in this black abyss out there, and on these little tiny dots, and yeah, and so for me, that adds that very much fantasy aspect to
Yeah.
what is
Mhm.
otherwise a pretty straightforward space opera,
Mhm.
interstellar, galactic war and battle and politics and all that stuff.
I think that this kind of definition and these boxes are more useful when we try to market the books than to actually define what we have inside the story and the mechanics of the story.
Hmm.
Because at a certain point, even if you try to base your stories on absolutely 100% believable science, the more you are advance the timeline,
Yeah,
the more the stuff that you can do, the ability that you had, and the technology that you use becomes so far away from what we have now that it
yeah,
basically looks like magic. I don't
exactly.
know who said that if the technology is advanced enough, it becomes indistinguishable with magic. For example, if you read Dunes, the thing that Paul Atreides does and that many other civilization does, they look like magic. And there's
Hmm.
also the added feeling of the fact that the aesthetics of that world, they're very much coded in medieval
Yeah.
fantasy. So the way the
Hmm.
families works, the power struggles, and the emperors, and all the backstabbing. So,
Oh yeah.
but what I liked about your series is the fact that we still have the very strong military fantasy and military sci-fi aesthetics with
Mm-hmm.
spaceships and troops and that kind of straightforward conflict for against evil with all
Mm-hmm.
the twists and turns. But we also have a little bit of the added things that could be defined like fantasy, but not to the point to get to the Star Wars aesthetics. It's a little
Yeah.
bit more grounded. It's like for me in my mind, it looks more like The Expanse than it looks like Star Wars, because it looks like a little bit more closer to what we have here, because
And
the
that's
story is
intentional.
set in our current times. It
Hmm.
usually should be happening, I think, in modern times. So
Yeah, it's very much a theme in my books that these other worlds, they are connected to us in so many ways. I mean, we were actually a
mhm,
part of them in the past in the lore of my universe.
yeah.
So I wanted these worlds to be believable in the sense that it's really just humans very much similar to us that perhaps just got a little more advanced in what our world would possibly look like a couple hundred years from now with
Mhm.
this technology and this magic also at the forefront of controlling things. Thank you, Tori.
It
That's
works.
perfect.
You've sold the book. So, do you want to give us an elevator pitch for if someone, for whatever reason, they have never heard about your books? And actually, statistics on my YouTube studio, they say that all the videos that I upload, 70% of people that know absolutely nothing about me, they're reaching me for the first one, and 30% are recurring audience. So that's the perfect time for you to give us an elevator pitch of your story and to introduce it a little bit to a new audience.
Yeah, no, definitely. So we spoke briefly about it. Power of the Stars. The first book is The Forsaken Planet. It is kind of what we said, a science fantasy space opera series. I have had readers liken it to Ender's Game meets Star Wars. I think that holds very much with a little bit of a kind of contemporary urban fantasy twist to it. I've had it called Wheel of Time and Space by one reader. I like to think especially as the series progresses, there's a little bit of Red Rising vibes, a little bit of Band of Brother vibes to it. I've never read The Expanse actually, but I've gotten Abel's not the first one to say The Expanse and can link it to my books. But yeah, it's basically a story of it follows a group of young guys, contemporary Earth, and their world is just turned upside down when basically an alien fleet arrives in the skies and attacks occur in certain places. And our group of characters that we mainly follow, at least in book one, they are caught up in that attack, and that kind of what launches them into this story.
Mhm.
And the whole planet comes to learn that this alien force that came is actually human, and there are many other worlds that humans live upon. They have known of our existence for our entire society's timeline, but they have purposely kept themselves hidden. There's reasons behind why that is, and also the other big thing is what we were just discussing is they are capable of wielding was the magic system in my books called Solera, and it's kind of star magic, like I said. Think kind of the Force, except everyone on the planets have it. Like I said, their tech, everything runs by it. and that's a big part of also why they kept themselves from Earth, because for whatever reason that power was lost on Earth in the distant the past. And yeah, that's kind of how the story starts to unfold. There's a power struggle going on with two of these other worlds. That is what led them back to Earth, putting Earth kind of in the middle of it all. There's a chosen one prophecy trope that's in there. It seems pretty straightforward, but it isn't. And yeah, that's the story. That's how things launch off from there. Our characters then need to decide: do they want to be part of this struggle, or do they want to keep just being insignificant people on Earth who are just going to pray that those ships don't arrive back in the skies the next day?
And okay.
Thanks
Bye,
for
John.
stopping
See you
by.
soon. Yeah, absolutely. I'll be glad to be on one of your streams. It will be great. And to praise your book a little bit, I think that you did a very good job on the politics
Thank
of what happens, especially in when humanity for the first time gets involved in this huge, incredible conflict. And I think that that's something that I haven't seen done in many other novels, especially because usually when you have straight sci-fi, they're so far in the future, then the politics of those novels, they're influenced in the timeline. They look different, even if the basic urges that we have and needs and maybe the basic evil,
Yeah.
they're all really similar. But to deal with that kind of a conflict with a world that very much looks and works like the world that we have today, it's pretty unique, especially when the core cast has to deal with the fact that most of them, they still have people on Earth, because I don't think that's a huge spoiler, but there's a school
No,
setting. They have to learn
of
to
course, of
wield
course.
that power outside Earth. They have to travel to a school setting on another planet that has his specific aesthetics, and the way they have to learn and to reconnect with the kind of power is really interesting. One of the highlights of that first novel is the way specifically the protagonist has to learn how to um, touch again that power in a very specific way that I think it's brilliantly done. And I hope that everyone will give it a chance just specifically for that. And I think that the second book then shifts a little bit, because it becomes a little bit more of a military fantasy, because we are in the middle of the conflict. The
Yeah,
stakes are higher, the rhythm and the pacing is much higher. There's much more fighting,
definitely much
but
faster
it's,
paced than the first book was, in terms of
yeah.
action and all that.
And we also have a point of view of someone that stole my heart in the first book that really has much more space in the second one, but I'm not going to spoil anything of that. You have to read it for yourself. And I'm really curious to see how that develops in the third one that regrettably I still haven't read, but I
That's
will
okay.
try to read pretty soon, because it's been pretty crazy couple of weeks for me.
You just released a
But
book recently, so I know how that goes. Believe me.
yeah, you see how black my have bags under my because of that. I've lost a ton of sleep because of that, but I'm really happy. So let's talk a little bit about your journey from a reader and from a user to a producer to a writer. Where did you decide that you wanted to make this story? No, let's go even back. The idea for this story, and then where did you decide to publish it, to make it actually a novel?
Yeah, well, the idea came forward in my teens. Really, I spoke a little before about how I've always had this love for space, the mysteries of it, all that, and space stories, space movies. And I've had this deep love for epic fantasy books. And I really just wanted a story that kind of blended the two. I've also always kind of read these epic fantasy books and said to myself, they're supposed to take place on worlds we don't know. How do we know those worlds aren't out there somewhere? And in this vast universe, we know less than 1% of 1% about.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
so it just was a cool idea to me to try and write a story that mixes all of that and develops all of that together into its own thing. And I started in my teens writing it, and obviously, I didn't go to school for writing. I wasn't part of writing groups, any of that. My only
Uh-huh.
experience was my reading that I constantly did. And
Mhm.
so it took me years and years to write the first draft. I finished the first draft sometime in my early to mid 20s, and then it kind of sat. I didn't do much with it for a while. And then I got to a phase. I opened up my own company and in construction, and I've been running that ever since. That took obviously a big chunk of my time and life away. And then in my late 20s, for whatever reason, I opened it back up, and I remember I did a heavy self edit of
Mhm.
it. I was taking online courses. It wasn't like classes, but it was online videos and tutorials to kind of teach myself editing and whatnot. And I did a heavy edit, and that was actually, and this is 10 years ago now, and that was when I purchased or it was right around that, it might have been a couple years later, I purchased the cover for The Forsaken Planet.
Okay.
And had that put together because I was thinking at that time, oh, I'm just going to go ahead and self-publish. I tried querying for a brief stint. Might have been a little bit after when I'm talking about, and I just knew right away it wasn't going to get
Mhm.
picked up. I was way above the word count of what everyone wanted. And it just didn't seem like the type of story that a lot of the agents were asking for. They were also asking for types of authors, what
Uh-huh.
and stuff like that, and it didn't seem like it was in the works. And
Mhm.
so I went right away, knew I wanted to self-publish. But during that time, then I met my wife, got married, we had kids, I built our house, all that good stuff, which
Serious
made
life
yeah.
happened.
So I didn't touch anything with the books for, it was at least 5 years. I think it was 5 or 6 years. And then in the back end of 2022, I slowed down with my business a little bit outside of writing. And I said, you know what, I'm going to open that back up. I want to look at it again, because it's always sat in the back of my mind, the story. And,
Mhm.
even I finished the first draft 12 to 15 years ago. And I've even had the ideas constantly coming up for book 2, book 3, book 4 in that time since I finished that draft. But yeah, I opened it back up. I read it, and it had been so long since I touched it. It was like I was reading a different author's work. It was a little bit of a surreal experience, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it, but I'm biased, obviously. I wrote it based off of my
Yeah.
personal preferences with everything. But I loved it. I said, I got to get this out there. I got to see what other people think of it. And that was when I really bunkered down and went into a deep dive edit. I hired an editor and actually worked with an editor through it. I hired beta readers, worked with them, went through the whole process, and I released it in June of 2023, The Forsaken Planet. Had the whole mix that you and I don't remember if we were talking on stream or off stream at this point, but about just the learning curve and
Mhm.
getting used to the good and the bad that comes with being an author, and the bad reviews, the good reviews, all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, I also had a big percentage of readership that seemed to really enjoy the books. I mean, you were
Yeah.
one of them. You reached out to me. You let me know what you thought. You let me know the good and the bad. But you letting me know the bad. I could tell it came from a place of passion, where it was because you were invested in the story and you enjoyed the
Yeah.
story. And so that just really gave me a kick in the butt to especially with the ideas had been in my head for so long, to really rush through and get the next one out there. And I got the next one out there in about a year. Did a novella 2 months after that, and then it's been about a year, and now I am 1 week away, a week from tomorrow, from dropping The Dark Element, which is
Looks
very
good.
interesting. Thank you, thank you.
I
It's
think
definitely
that's
the cover that's gotten
my
the most
favorite
reception
cover.
for me.
Yeah, yeah, it's incredible. The color scheme and the
Yeah.
title is a little bit ominous,
Hmm.
and I think it works. I have to say that in many years being in the market, in the Italian market, and now freshly baked in the international market, I have, and especially because I have read so many books and so many things. You get to a point when you recognize if a book has been competently written because it was a paycheck. And there's
Hmm.
nothing wrong with that. It's entertainment. It can
Yeah.
work marvelously well, even if it's been mass produced. Okay,
Hmm.
but sometimes you can recognize if a work is a work of is a labor of love. If
Hmm.
there is an other level, there's something else there, and I think it goes hand on hand with the idea that I have about talent. I come from a school of thought in Italy that says that talent doesn't exist, that everyone can produce extraordinary things if every one of us were put in the same situation with the same chances and possibility and the same access to instruction and to studies. We can all deliver incredible things. I think that's incredibly stupid. I think there are people that are gifted and that can produce special things because there is something different in their mind, especially when we talk about stories. I'm sorry. And I think that even if this was especially a first book, pretty glaringly a first book, and that's what sparked my criticism that I gave you personally, and that you can find in my review when my YouTube channel was really young, and I produced really awful videos. Not that my current videos are that perfect, but they were pretty bad. The first bunch of videos. That's why I decided I had to discuss this, because the amount of love and the way you were able to write a cohesive and well written and well delivered story with so little experience. There was something special there, even if the book had a long gestation. But you have to put the words. You have to.
Hmm.
It's like a sport. Your brain has to be rewired to be able to deliver that kind of story. This was special for me because there was something there, and I think I'm right, because the second book is that much better than the first one, even if I enjoyed the first one so much. And I have no doubt that the third one will be even better. I don't know how many books you're planning for this series, but I hope you'll keep growing and growing, and I'm
I
pretty
appreciate that.
sure that the rest of the series will be even better than what
I
we
think book
have
three
here.
is by far. I mean, again, biased, obviously, but my read
Yeah.
through, my final read through of book three. I love my book one, my book two. I think they're very good books. Reading book three, it makes me, just as the author, wish this could be book one, that could be everyone's first experience, because it's just really, again, I'm biased, but I just think it's far and wide better than the others. And again, that's not to say the others are bad. I don't think
Yeah,
they are at
no.
all. Obviously, there's plenty of people
I
who
think
don't.
the first book did a good job in opening the world to the readers and introducing the characters. It does it's a dirty job, but someone has to do it,
Yeah.
and it,
Yeah.
it does it in and I don't think we unless you keep rewriting the same book for 20 years, or if you pull off a um, which is the third book in the after the name of the wind, that has been written and rewritten for the last 15 years or so.
Hmm.
You have to start somewhere, and that you have
Yeah.
to be gracious enough with yourself to accept that, and the perfect book doesn't exist, and
No.
all
Yeah.
the
No. And I'm fully
weaknesses.
understanding of, I'm just
Mhm.
a better writer now. I've
Exactly.
had three books worth of experience before this one, of working with editors, working with beta readers, getting reader feedback, as we were speaking of reviews and
Yeah.
stuff like that before. That's all the stuff that makes you better. And again, I don't think my first book is bad. I think maybe there are some growing pains. Maybe
Mhm.
now with the experience I have, I might have done a couple things differently, but at the same time, I don't know. I
Mhm.
think it goes hand in hand with my series, though. My characters in my series, it was very much a point to make them kind of immature in the first book and to make them feel younger. And I always wanted my later books to feel more mature, more intense, more
Mhm.
just a little bit older. And I think a part of why I think that is successful in my books is because I've gotten a little bit better as a writer too. And
And you're
hey, it's a
growing up
series.
as a person, so
Yeah,
what you want to write, the themes that you face and you put in your books, they change organically through
100%.
time. So
And for
the
me, I put things in book one, in book two. I've always kind of known where deep in this series was going. Even when I
Mhm.
was, going through that edit a few years back with the Forsaken Planet, I knew where these characters were heading towards. And I think why book three especially came out so good, in my opinion, is because I finally hit the point I wanted to hit for many of them. I finally reached the level I wanted many of them to reach. And there's a lot of things that are going to make more sense from book one and book two to readers, to fans of the series when they get through book three, because a lot of the arcs finally come to a head of where they've been going for quite some time now.
Mhm. You have my full endorsement and my total support. So if you haven't checked the
Thank
series, please check it out. So
you.
if you enjoy the aesthetics of the Expanse, a little bit of, of Star Wars, some of the mechanics of the politics that you have, the deep politics that you have in Star Trek too, but also a world that sounds like, that feels like the Wheel of Time, it feels like epic fantasy, but in space, give it a try. And I have the last question for you, well, a question that I like to ask to all the authors that decide they're crazy enough to be part of this kind of live stream. It is, what is the hardest question, the hardest lesson that you have learned by being an author and by being in the industry during the 2 or 3 years that you have been an author now? What do you think?
I would say the hardest lesson is, so I very much growing up have been taught kind of the type of person that if you put the effort in, if you put your will towards it, everything you can, that will lead to success. And I don't know how much I've necessarily believe that. Kind of goes with what you were saying before, but probably the hardest lesson of an author is just putting all of my work into this, putting all of my effort, energy, and don't get me wrong, I have fans of the series. There are people enjoying this books. I love that. But just, I think the hardest lesson is the luck factor of, you could write, and I'm not saying mine's the best book out there, but you could write the best book out there and still it doesn't go anywhere. There's just so much more than just the writing involved in all this. There's the marketing, and I semi understood that going in. I knew it was always going to be an uphill battle, but again, I've just been the kind of person that, like, even if it's not something I'm a pro at, I'm going to face it head on. And for most things, I'm able to overcome it to an extent. And I think I did, in a sense, with this. Obviously, I had no social media following before I published. I came on. I was just a dot that just appeared and just said, I'm just going to keep growing and getting in your face till you hear something about it. And I think I've reached an audience. I definitely have made relationships. I'm so thankful for everything. I'm for self-published indie standards. I know I'm doing much better than the vast majority of others, and I'm very, very grateful for that. But the hardest lesson is definitely just the idea that a lot of things are out of your control, I think, in this this publishing sphere. And you're working, I want to say you're working with and against algorithms, and that is going to be the major aspect defining whether or not your book is out there. And granted, I'm not saying books that means that there's popular books that they're not good. That's not the case. Your book does have to be good to reach that next level, but you also need to have you need to catch a little bit of luck in sense of algorithms and stuff like that to take it off with it. So that's probably been the hardest lesson for me, if that makes sense.
It makes sense, and I think it will be useful for if anyone is watching this stream or the replay, and they're in a position that they have published something, or they're approaching the idea of publishing something. The fact is that despite your best effort, sometimes it will take time.
Yeah,
to
it's a
be
long
in
game.
a place.
That's what I always say with other authors. It's a long game. We all just got to look at it as a long game.
But also to feel comfortable in the position when you are, because you can be you can have a mindset of grinding and producing and getting out faster than you can, because you have a certain objective, a certain goal that may or may not be realistic. And you have to understand that for 99% of the people doing this job, it's pure passion. And what they got out of that, most of the time, is not actually money and not fame, of course. It is the satisfaction that it is intrinsic in writing and producing something. And especially for people that are that they like to produce things. I have a mindset of someone who's been working in graphic design for many years. So for me, the idea of having the book with my design, the external and the internal, it's some kind of it's a prophecy that fills
Mhm.
itself, and it works that way. If I can make a bunch of money with that, it's good too,
Yeah,
but I'm not
it's a nice
holding my
benefit.
breath, okay?
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
I know how difficult that is. And if you have that mindset, if you're a new author, or if you've been in the game for 10 years, everything outside the interaction and the feedback from the readers and the satisfaction of making your story something real and tangible, everything else is a plus. It's a welcome plus, but
Mhm.
it shouldn't be the basics. And just for example, just to underline your concept and how lucky you have to be to make it a success in the broader scope of the things, because there are
Mhm.
many definitions of success based on this
Yes, of
discussion.
course.
I was watching an interview with a young author that was the older author, and this older author were interviewing her to try and push to give a commercial push to this new author for this new book. And one of the first questions he asked to this new author was, why did he decided, let's say them, okay, he or her, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter, why they decided to go the traditional route in publishing that book that then ended up having a really lucrative contract. And they answered, I laugh, but it was, for me, was a really sad, understandable but sad answer. They said for the prestige of it. And I understand the answer, because you put so much work and effort and time in producing a book and you want to be compensated. But that was a debut novel. And this person had a mindset that they want to be famous and
Yeah.
they want to be recognized. Again, I don't say that that's not reasonable, but that was the
Yeah. Yeah.
first answer. It wasn't about passion. It wasn't about storytelling. It wasn't about connecting with the reader. It was about prestige.
Yeah.
And I had that book in my wish list. And I immediately went to take it away, because I knew that that book was driven by design,
Yeah.
by a board, by a commission, and then by a design to
Mhm.
reach a goal that I cannot share and that I can understand, but I cannot endorse. So,
Which
if
unfortunately is
especially,
trad. That unfortunately is just kind of trad from everything I'm hearing nowadays. It's you got
yeah,
to follow the certain tropes. You got a checklist of
mhm,
things they want in the books, and
mhm,
it's unfortunate. It's like that, and it is. It's tough. It's tough out there. Even trying to get in. Even if I was to try and query today my
mhm.
series, it's they don't really. I don't think they're taking very many, and unless you're someone who's got you're a booktuber with 50,000 plus
Yeah,
followers or something
mhm,
like that. Who's all the new people you're hearing about getting trad signed deals that haven't debuted a book yet? They're people who have huge social media followings, which to
mhm.
me that's unfortunate because you can still write a great book and have a social media following, but one does not equate to the other. That's learning
Exactly.
how to beat an algorithm and make video content has nothing to do with writing a book. So it's but I
And
get it
for
because they
many of
think
us,
that's
it's luck.
guaranteed
Yeah.
sales to come with it. So it's sad the state of things, but I
Mhm.
hear everything you're saying because I think that's why trad is being so frowned upon by many nowadays because the heart kind of feels out of a lot of these stories. That's what made a lot of books great, at least for me growing up, was you felt the heart, you felt the passion of what that
Exactly.
person was doing and what they believed in their characters and in their stories. And I just feel like that's gone nowadays with a lot of stuff
Exactly.
that comes out.
Many of them, they look extremely similar, and many of them try to look packaged to be packaged in a to look different, but they kind of become a new similar because they look all the same in that new fashion.
Hmm.
uh, and that's funny, that's sad, but also really funny. But if there is a lesson that people that are watching this, and if they're writers and they want to be writers, that they can say from this live stream, is that if you can release in the market something that you really put your heart and soul in, and you made it the best that you could possibly made it in that moment. And if you reached your initial goal on an artistic level and on a story level for that time, you 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 must be proud of that, and it must be enough to push you to go on. And if
For
you
sure.
try to push one, publish one, and two, and three, and then you decide you're too tired, there are other things in your life that must have more space, that's fair enough. But if you
Yes.
decide that you wanna quit after the first book because you didn't sell enough copies,
Yeah,
and you
no.
have to understand, if you didn't sell enough copies because the book wasn't good. I'm not saying that you have to be the Lulu and try to sell something that doesn't work because it was not carefully written and produced. Okay, if it has a bad cover, if it has bad editing, if it has a non-existent proofreading, of course it's not going to sell, unless it is part of a specific niche of books that they sell because they hit specific plot points that reader
Yeah.
wants. And I'm talking about your romantasy. But basically, if you are passionate about that, don't do it for the money, especially at the beginning, because if you do it
Yeah.
for the money, you will quit in less than
No.
6 months. And I've seen this
Especially if you're
happening so
self-published.
many times, and it's so sad.
Yeah.
So,
No,
yeah.
hey, I mean, it is what it is. It's everyone's, for me, it was just having those readers that I knew enjoyed the story. I could tell by talking to them, they were invested, they were emotionally involved in
Mhm,
my story. And for me, that was enough to say, I'm appreciative of what I'm doing. I
mhm.
yes, you always, all of us who go into that first book are always dreaming about that. Oh, it's going to blow up and everyone's going to
Exactly.
love it. But you do have to have a semblance. And I had somewhat of a semblance. I mean, I don't know if you read blanking, what's it called? What you, who you give the book to, why am I blanking on the word right now? The
What are
thing
you
that's
talking?
always in the beginning of books, people say for my family, for my blah,
Ah,
blah, blah.
acknowledgements.
Acknowledgement, yeah.
Okay.
Mine was our devotion. Mine was to my daughters, and I basically said, I said there is success, or no, making the attempt garners its own form of success, and I put that in there because I kind of knew odds were it wasn't going to blow up and be this, and I didn't think that because I didn't think it was a good book. I think it's a great book. I still think it's a great
Mhm,
book. I put that in because I knew it's just the odds are very much against it blowing up right away like that.
mhm. Exactly.
And it's what we've been saying. It's a long game. You're going to have to, if you read Brandon Sanderson's first book, I don't think it's going to be nearly as good as
Exactly.
some of your favorite stuff of his. And that's just what it is. And you write more, you get better, you work with more people, you get more feedback, you make more relationships, you get better as you go. And that's how we all have to, I think, approach it in this self-published space.
You did a great job. The book
Thank
that
you.
you released are all really enjoyable. They hit specific spots that make them specifically enjoyable. They're nicely packaged. This is the first one. So if you haven't read this series, the Power of the Star
Three
series,
coming
give it a
out.
try. This is the first one. That's the last one. And yeah, absolutely. Let's read the last comments that we have, and then I'll let you go because I
Okay.
know you're a busy man. This one comes from the lovely and the handsome and scholar and a gentleman, Chris Bravo.
Great man
I
right
write
there.
fantasy for myself, which reminds me that he has a work in progress.
He
And
does.
I will be gravely offended if I don't read that before the general public because I expect to be treated accordingly to my status of a booktuber with 1,000 subscribers. Okay, my love for a genre that ignites imagination and adventure. I mean, sure, I hope people will give it a chance and sell some copies, but it is all about the passion. And I don't think I can word it in a better way. This is absolutely the best way, I think, to approach the market, especially for self publishers. Okay.
100%.
Okay, so thank you for all of you watching this live stream. If you're being here online with us, it's been a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for all of your question, your interaction, and if you're watching the replay, you will find in the description box links to for the social networks when you can find Bryan and to go and buy the books. And thank you, Bryan, for being here. This has been amazing.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a ton of fun. I was looking forward to this. We obviously talk back and forth a lot, but this is the first video one, so I'm so glad we did this.
This is really, really nice. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you in the next video. I think I'll upload another video tomorrow with upcoming books and reviews. I will be reviewing Heliotrope by Palmer Pickering, which is probably one of my favorite books from 2025. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye, bye, bye.